This is Balancing Acts by Forging People. Forging People is my business. Actually, Forging People came from a line in one of my early talks that in life we can either allow our adversities and our challenges and all the spicy things, to use that term, to negatively impact us for the rest of our days, or actually we can choose these things to forge something better. That's kind of where the company name comes from. Balancing Acts is all about getting different opinions, different insights, different specialisms around certain niches that we go through in life and also in business as well. And today we're tackling a biggie. We're talking communication and neurodiversity for people that work with neurodiverse individuals, but also who may be a neurodiverse individual who is looking to communicate more effectively. I've brought you some amazing guests. So if you've not met me before, my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. It is a proper job, I promise you. It's been my job for about 11 years now. It's paid my mortgage, so we'll call that a proper job. But I don't focus on anything else other than engagement. I am not solution focused. So ethically, morally, and for insurance purposes, I make sure that I bring in solution focused people that actually know their stuff and share their experiences for you, to give you a real four-dimensional approach to any given subject that we're talking about. With my other cap on, I'm also a transformational speaking coach, and some of that will come in today as well. It's not presentation skills, it's about to bear witness to. It's about actually changing our narrative to change our experience, and that's certainly something I want to talk to today's guests about. We work in lots of different spaces with people leaders, through the frontline environment, through the host and creator of KFC TV. I trained all my life for that gig. I'm 6'4", 25 stone, hosting a fried chicken TV station. Dream job or what? Just goes to show you can do anything you want in life. But also do a lot of work in the emergency services and the Ministry of Defence as well, for the frontline military. Forging People, this is all going to come through in a handout. I'm going to skip over this right now. But the whole reason why I wanted to do these sessions is because I've built a career sharing unfiltered opinions on my own experiences of mental illness and mental health challenges, but also other subjects that I've kind of crossed with along the way, to really give you an insight maybe that you won't see anywhere else, to give that four-dimensional approach. This is going to be very different from any other initiative or webinar you've been to before, hopefully in a good way, but the engine's running just in case. But joining me today are two amazing guests, and we have first up Beth Thomas. Beth, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. In a nutshell, I'm neurodivergent and a certified ADHD life coach and workplace training consultant. That essentially means that I help individuals and organizations figure out the ways to work with their brains so that they are creating really neuro-inclusive spaces for everyone to thrive in.
Love that. Thank you very much, and welcome along. And Ben Slater. Ben.
Thank you. I love this slide. It does make me look like an arsonist, but but that's not a professional gig. So my role is as a trainer for mental health first aid and suicide first aid, and also bespoke there. I've been in the sector for 27 years, and I'm still learning. And what I'm loving learning is when people say, actually, I learn like this, and it means that your training has to be increasingly inclusive, and that's my learning curve. So I love it.
Absolutely. So, right into the topic today. I guess I want to start with a more kind of, umbrella question to both of you. And what does neurodiversity mean to you? Beth, we'll start with Beth first on this one, please.
Thank you. All right, so neurodiversity means to me an umbrella term to understand and embrace that there are a huge variety in the different ways in which we can all function. That goes all the way from, perceiving information, being able to process it, all the way through to, communicating it and engaging effectively and positively. So it's really a sort of umbrella term, I suppose, to really understand the rich diversity within how we all operate and work. And for me, it's also been a really important means of identifying myself. So I had never been assessed or sort of identified as neurodivergent when I was growing up. So it became an opportunity for me to recontextualize a lot of the difficulties that I had otherwise experienced, and only ever really been able to internalize as character flaws because I didn't have a framework. So I was just the weird one. I was just the, overly chatty one, or the one that was too much or not enough. And so all of those things became a way in which I could go, oh, okay, I actually get that now. Something that can help me understand myself and then understand, my place in the world, how I engage with it, and how I can, communicate effectively with others. So lots of stuff, really. But yeah, something really profound.
Absolutely. Ben?
I think what it's come to mean to me lately is it's the richness of communication that you don't know yet because you haven't met that person yet. And I find that more and more with each course and so on. And actually, for me, and I know this is going to sound quite poetic, but actually, there's a beauty to understanding that there are lots and lots of different ways of communicating that aren't your defaults, my training's only got richer by listening to people and the way in which they like to do, not just they endure doing training, but that they like and love doing training.
So thank you. I think actually that's a really interesting thing, because a friend of the show, Helen Taylor Brimson, who is a therapist, I know Joe's met her before as well, with her work, and she works with young children, and also things as a 47-year-old guy, things back in the day, things that we would have perceived as naughty, aggressive, overexcitable, even down to the anxious level too. It's easy to kind of write people off, and Helen put a post out about this morning, that actually that's a lot of our perception. So generationally, there's a difference. My first awareness piece when it comes to neurodiversity, I was working with Western College, and Western College asked me to do a guest lecture piece on public speaking, but it was to an audience of students who have autism and ADHD. And when I first went in, there are so many heads on the desk, and I'm thinking, this is going to be the toughest crowd ever. I didn't have a clue what I was walking into. And that lecturer just said that kind of the blocking out the outside senses so they can actually really tune into what you're talking about. They want to engage. Whereas in a public audience, if people were doing that, I would take that as a speaker that I'm really not going to be getting anywhere today. So it's really interesting, this communication with neurodiverse individuals, and actually Beth as a neurodiverse individual as well, and how you work, how do you want to be communicated with? It's about shaking up our delivery styles, isn't it? So Beth, what's your take on that? I guess maybe Beth, if you can take the angle of how do you want to be communicated with, and Ben, when I come to you, how do you then engage and communicate with neurodiverse individuals?
Absolutely. So it's a really difficult one, because what I will say when speaking from this perspective is that this is my perspective alone, and I certainly could not then say it would be fair to roll that out to assuming that's how every neurodivergent person wants to be communicated with. So I think one of the most important things to bear in mind with this is that when you are working with neurodivergent people, each and every one of those people will have a very unique experience of what can sometimes be similar things, but ultimately is a very, very unique way in which they're going to engage with it. So for me, it's so crucial to be understood. And we'd like to sit here and say, yeah, no, that's what everyone gets, right? No, it's really not. And one of the quickest ways in which we can really look at doing that is asking the person. So if someone is communicating with me, I really, really value and appreciate someone asking, what works for you? How can I support you? And how can I meet you where you're at versus the other way around? And where there leaves a lot of inference and kind of me having to try and figure out and do that thing called reading between the lines that, a lot of people really struggle with for lots of different reasons. So asking the person first and foremost is something really, really helpful for me particularly. When it comes to different types of communication and what works for me, it also really varies on the situation. So again, it's not a linear sort of, one size fits all situation. So I will have different needs depending on the sort of different style of communication or the different task at hand. So for instance, I absolutely am fantastic when it comes to advocating for my clients and for other people. So I can do that really well. And that includes me being able to pick up the phone and, you know, sort of really mask up and put what I need to into that situation to make sure that they're getting what they need. Can I do that for myself? That's a very different story. Not without at least one meltdown, you know, possibly me thinking, oh my gosh, I'm an imposter, the audacity of me to have needs that I want met, you know. So it's a really difficult one, which means that if I'm making a call, you know, I'm often having to tap into my support network to be able to do that, whether that looks like having someone on the phone with me or asking if I can communicate via email instead as an alternative. So those types of things are really, really helpful.
But I love that, because the commonality is we all think we need a special set of rules to engage with a different set of people, but actually that should be a very human experience. You ask people how they want to be engaged. I guess especially nowadays, if you have, I know we have team leaders on the call today, if you have a team of 10 people, you've got 10 different experiences of life and business and everything else at the moment anyway, regardless of anything around neurodiversity or even mental health challenges, adversities. So actually, that's a really nice thing to know, that we don't need a special set of rules. We just ask better questions. I really like that. That's really cool. I did give Beth the kind of the permission before we hit go on this, that if I screw up, tell me off. I want to be told off publicly if I get, because there's so much I don't know in life. So that quite reassures me, to be fair. But Ben, coming to you as a coach, a trainer, delivers to different audiences. Again, how do you adapt your skill set and your specialisms and your knowledge and your learning to different audiences?
I mean, I think it's really interesting here. So quite often we think about coaching as, you know, this one-to-one experience over here, and training as really quite different. But I mean, essentially, coaching is an environment that you could create, and you can do that elsewhere. So I've got quite a big overlap between my training and my coaching, in terms of I take the time to find out before somebody gets in a group or whatever. There's plenty of opportunity for them to meet me online, to hear my voice. Sometimes it's my voice, my accent, just the cadence of the way I talk, what I look like. It's about taking away all the surprises, and then people have questions, which is, you know, things like, you know, will it be lots of talking all the time? Will I like to ask questions in this way? And the way that's developed with the coaching and also with the training is that I think it's in the contracting, both with the coaching and the training. So more often now I'm saying all the things that I've learned, which are, if you don't put your hand up during this session, the only thing that I will assume is that that's how you prefer to engage. Because some people worry throughout the whole training that they're not putting their hand up enough. And yet when you are, it's not even giving permission, but just realizing that humanity is broad and rich, that in the feedback afterwards, people go, I was really pleased that my way of learning was recognized. I was really pleased that I was able to text a question to the person who's in the same room. I was really pleased that there was no role play. I mean, essentially everyone's pleased if there's no role play. Let's be honest. I see there's some nods and smiles from the group here. So I think that, so for me, it's just with each challenge, it has been, I've adapted and made things again just wider, more open. One thing about timing as well. Why do things have to go in a particular pacey way for us to think that they're effective, when there are people who process at a different speed, but what they come up with are absolute gems. And if I can give just one example, so training with people in a hospital school, and it was a mixture of staff and students. And one of them had been quiet for a long time, and we were talking about diagnoses, when people are diagnosed with mental health mental health illness or mental illness. And they thought for a long time, and they said, so a diagnosis, this was a young person, so a diagnosis is just so that the adults supporting me ask less stupid questions. Absolute gem. I've used that description of a diagnosis to this day. But if I'd not given the space or time for somebody to see it in their way, and if you like, the psychological safety for them to speak up, my presentations moving forward would have been all the poorer. So there's just hundreds of those examples that we can swing by for the sake of style over substance.
Absolutely love that. Thanks, Ben. Beth, I guess on a one-to-one front, when you're working with other people, relating this to kind of a mental health perspective, which obviously is the world I know the most in that sense, that counsellors have counsellors in that sense. They have that kind of supervision. And very often we get into the roles that we get as coaches, as trainers, as mental health champions, well-being champions. We get into these kind of roles because we have had negative experiences or directly or indirectly ourselves. So therefore, there is that risk of you being that kind of the ADHD life coach, stepping into that role. Is there a risk of you becoming that kind of wounded healer and actually giving everything that you've got to the detriment of yourself? How do you deal with people as somebody that completely relates to somebody?
With great difficulty, Nick. No, I mean,
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
I'm a very, very transparent person, and I think this is something we often have in common. And I think it's vital, particularly with the specialist area I work in, to really have that transparency and have that level of openness and honesty with anyone I'm working with or anyone that's looking at what I'm doing, because that is one of the ways in which I can hold myself accountable to making sure that I maintain those boundaries. So it is particularly difficult when I am working as a practitioner within areas that I can personally relate to, and that is both a strength and a risk. So it's a strength because it gives me the ability to be able to connect with and really understand what that person might be going through, and it's a risk because I understand what that person is going through. So unless I am making sure I'm doing everything I need to do to really hold that safely, then I am absolutely going to be taking that on board, and I am going to be risking burnout, compassion burnout, and becoming a wounded healer. So I have to have that level of transparency among a range of other things that enable me to continue showing up safely. So one of the things that I actually actively seek is supervision. So coaching is actually an unregulated industry, and I think it's really important that people know this when they're looking for specialist practitioners, particularly if they're looking for specific things to be supported with. So supervision is one of the ways in which I can ensure I'm handling my caseload safely. It's not a requirement because it's not a regulated industry, but how anyone can do that without supervision, I would love to know. But yes,
that kind of really ticks that ethical and moral box, though, that actually if you're taking on the responsibility of being that helper in that sense, there has to be that kind of ethical moral drive to take on that responsibility. So I absolutely get that. You both put together kind of programs of working with organizations. I guess I know from the people we have on the call live right now, but also the people that will be catching up on the recordings of these, all the spaces that are working in the prison system, especially, so many challenges, education for sure. But we have some great trainers and coaches on the call right now. We have people that develop programs. How do you, or maybe what tips and kind of tips can you offer on putting together training programs that are fully inclusive for every individual in that sense?
I love this one, and I would say there's a phrase that it's a bit Marmite these days, depending on how many times you've heard it, but nothing about us without us. If you're looking at developing a training program that is, let's say, neuro-inclusive and targeting specific areas of understanding neurodivergency and inclusion, go and seek the people with that lived experience that can really help you build a rich and robust program that reflects that. Because if you're going to deliver it and it's not going to actually think about that really key component, then you might be missing a trick.
I love that, because I think sometimes that's a very overlooked aspect of being part of the whole overview of the solution, in that sense that lived experience is the perfect vehicle to drive engagement to these solutions that are out there, and actually the perfect vehicle to drive people to get help from you guys and the other people that are out there doing great things. Because what you're kind of giving people is not just inspiration, but also that kind of accountability. Well, if Beth can do this, I can do this too. And if Ben can do this, I can do this. And I like that. I think lived experience should be a vital part of that program. And thank you for bringing that into the mix, Beth. Ben, what would you like to add to that?
So for me, the best outcomes for training programs are when they're person centered. And I know that sounds really challenging if you're going through a theme or a topic. But what I find is that when training or organizations are person centered, then we talk with people about possibility. And when training programs are systems so focused, so there's the tech work and all that, then actually we start to talk about people as probability, because we're looking at the percentage retention and so on the home screen and how many people have got through it and so on. And then when we are focusing on performance, we start to talk about people as liability. So are these people going to bring my figures down? So there's a lot at stake when we take our eye off people as the center for our programs. And if people love a stat, who doesn't love a statistic? But neurodiverse training increases retention on courses by 60%, because people learn better when they sense that they are known. So if I belong in a space and I know that I'm working along different lines for particular things, and that is not a source of humiliation, but a source of enrichment, not just in accommodation, but enrichment. Guess what? I am sticking with you.
Yeah.
And quite often, I've got whole cohorts who say, because of my condition, I can't lie. So you have some really you have some really stripped back conversations that aren't brutal but are truthful, and there's got to be space for those things. So actually, I've had the biggest doses of truth in training from various cohorts who would have been deemed near impossible to train, which is not a term I would ever use.
Absolutely. So I'm just responding to Pete. So for anybody who's not in the chat box, Pete has asked if the transcript and the recording will be available after the session. So thank you, Ben. And you get a lot of love and nods from Beth as well. So bear in mind, this is the first time that you guys have been brought together. I'm really pleased that you've been able to kind of have so much kind of synchronicity in your experiences and insights. Thank you. I think I relate this very much to the session that we did, a balancing act session that we did around identity and pronouns. And it's really important to recognize that a lot of the empathy part, the self-awareness part, and actually the public awareness part is a winning hearts and minds kind of factor, because I guarantee generationally there will be a lot of hand-me-down conditioning that, I mean, I've had people say to me, oh, I don't believe in mental health. I mean, what the hell does that actually mean? But there are a lot of people, because they're not fully aware and they've not been brought up with the terminology, with the awareness, with a lot of people will just dismiss this without empathy and without kind of realization that this is something that we need to address and be inclusive of and bring in. I guess the question I want to throw back to you is, to both of you, is firstly, how important is empathy? But also, have you had an experience of any pushback on work that you've tried to do? Maybe experiences that you've put out. I mean, we all know social media can be quite an interesting, spicy place sometimes as well. Have either of you had any pushback, and how important is empathy in kind of creating a great space for neurodiversity? And again, whoever wants to go first on this.
Oh, I was waiting for Beth. Do you want to go first, Beth?
Sometimes I'm never sure, because I'm a very verbal processor. So every now and then I'm like, Beth, sit back. It's okay. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, these two points are huge for me. It's very much ingrained in a lot of the work I do, particularly because I work with often sort of late stage diagnosed people. So people that identify as neurodivergent later on in life. And so they've got a lot of internalized ableism to work through. They've got a lot of issues with self-esteem, self-confidence, perfectionism, burnout, you name it, they've got it. So being able to empathize is absolutely crucial for being able to ensure that you're holding a space safely, that people are feeling seen and heard, and that their experiences aren't being minimized or belittled or diminished, which is unfortunately what we often see, much more than, you know, us being sort of believed and validated. And in terms of those experiences of pushback, yes, on an often daily basis. And I'll actually even share a very personal example of this literally happening to me in the last couple of weeks. So as I mentioned earlier, we have, you know, sort of varieties in our strengths and challenges, and there are some things we can do, and it's, you know, context dependent. Driving is something I really struggle with. So I can drive really confidently, and oh, sorry, I thought there was someone adding something there. Yeah, so I know I'm a confident driver. I know I'm you know, a safe driver. But when it comes to things that require a lot of executive functioning, so that for me is motorway driving. I've got to drive. I've got to anticipate. There's multiple lanes of traffic. There's complex junctions. There's directions. It's a lot for me to take on board and make sure I'm processing effectively. So I'm a confident driver when I've got someone to help me co-regulate when I'm in the car. And the other day I did a huge drive to Wales and back, and so you'd be thinking, oh, Beth, you can drive to Wales and back. That's like 7 hours of motorway driving. Surely you should is the key word here, be, you know, fine with driving. And the reason this is so pertinent is because the very next day I had to drive to Essex to go and see a friend for some bridesmaid dress fitting. And I had the biggest meltdown, like one of the biggest meltdowns I've had in a really, really long time, because I didn't feel seen and heard by the support people I'd asked to help me drive, because they were like, oh, well, we've just changed plans because we thought you'd be fine with driving on your own because you've just done this big drive. Whoa there. I had to really dial it back and have a really hard conversation and say, hey, look, I can drive because I've got this support mechanism in place. That doesn't mean that I can just go and do the thing otherwise. And so that became a really challenging situation for me, because there were so many different things happening all at once. And if I'd have had that validation there and then to help me really de-escalate, that experience could have looked very different. And it's really tough, because when you're supporting someone who looks very capable, your first thought is to say, well, you should be able to do this thing. And that's where we have to really check in and reflect and ask ourselves, where is that should coming from? Is that coming from, you know, the ableism that we see all the time everywhere, that really influences how we can see other people's strengths and challenges? So validation is huge. I mean, the amount of people I see that have said things like, wow, you're the first person I've ever worked with in 20 plus years of mental health support who's actually understood me, and I don't now feel stupid as a result of that in this space, is, you know, both heartbreaking and very validating. But I think it speaks to a much greater, you know, concern that we have in terms of being able to empathize and validate people's experiences.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Beth. Ben.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I think that I mean, with empathy, that whole thing about feeling with others and seeking to understand before being understood, really, really key. What I'm learning loads about is how empathy is seen through lots of people's frame of reference, and also through their processing. So, for example, not everybody will engage with a Brené Brown description of empathy. She's very good at what she does, and some very good videos out there. But not everybody will engage with the analogies or things like that. And so I had a great conversation just last week, actually, with somebody who said, I want to seek to understand the other person, but everything beyond myself is a complete mystery, and I'm scared of getting it wrong. But what I can do is I know myself a lot in detail. So I will describe a little bit about myself, a story about myself, and say, is it a bit like that? And what I'm doing is I'm calibrating and saying, this is a complete mystery. Beyond me is a complete mystery. This isn't. Is your mystery a bit like the thing I know? And it absolutely blew my mind, because when we teach about empathy, we say, don't talk about yourself. Don't talk about yourself. But actually, if that helps you to understand the other person, they weren't dominating the conversation, and there wasn't any ego in it or pride in it. It was, if I'm going to understand the mystery that is you, I need to understand how much like it is me it is. And I thought that was a brilliant way for them to do empathy. They're going to make a brilliant mental health first aider.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I love the experiences because a lot of what you're both talking about is actually this. It provides strength, and Ben, you kind of mentioned it was along the lines of that kind of, it can be a beautiful thing in that sense.
Yeah.
There's also a question which I will come to before we wrap up around why the mental health and neurodiversity conversation keeps going round and round as well. That's something we will come to if we have time, but I promise you we will get there. But in Guess Harnessing Strengths, what the first time I noticed this personally was, again, through the speaking coaching work that I was doing. It was for a youth charity that I was working with, and actually students who had ADHD spoke with a brilliant energy, an energy that I couldn't tap into, an energy that I've not seen delivered elsewhere. And that was really the starting point of what launched my prison program, which was actually using what can be seen as something that holds you back or defines you negatively, or something that there's a stigma around, that actually can be, without sounding too cheesy, and I'm not going to swear, a superpower in that sense. I love that. I love seeing that. And actually, one of my greatest kind of, everything that I've done over the past 11 years, one of the things that really that's pleased me the most was actually taking somebody who was non-verbal and they delivered a small talk. And I love that, because I think there is something in that. I think there's something in your biggest adversity, challenge can be the most exciting thing that you have in your armory. We just need to use it in a different way. And I know in the work that you both do, you do that same kind of principle, that adversity to excitement. You're taking people that have challenges and give them something really exciting to do with it, or give them a reframe on it. And again, whoever wants to go first on this, have you got any wins you can celebrate on actually how this can be a strength and actually how we can tap into? I mean, Beth, you're probably a walking example of this because of what you're doing right now. But in terms of the work you've done for other people, let's start with you, Beth. Share some of your wins. I think that's really inspiring.
How long have you got, Nick?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I do first want to just really sort of shout out both of you guys for what you've both just recently said. The things that you've said encapsulate these points so beautifully, and I really resonate with them, and I'm sure a lot of other people will too. So that's really powerful, and you're quite right. I suppose I am a bit of a walking example. So yeah, I mean, thank goodness I didn't actually listen, ironically, because I have an attention, and I didn't listen to the teachers that told me to stop talking so much. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. But in terms of other client wins, I think this is perhaps one of the most powerful and exciting spaces that coaching can offer, is being able to get curious in a safe way about people's challenges and help them to, sort of pick them apart and really understand what's going on underneath that sort of surface level challenge or belief. And then to say, okay, what can we do with that? Where can we take that? And a lot of the reframing work that I'm often doing in that space is helping people to understand that if we can learn how to understand and apply these particular things differently, they will become strengths rather than sort of pure challenge. And so, oh God, I mean, where do I even begin? So I've been working with a client, for instance, for quite a while now, and the challenges that they had always previously perceived to be issues or problems about themselves, we've actually been able to reframe in such a way that they have just recently been offered a permanent position in an area of work which really aligns with all of their strengths that before working together they'd never actually realized were strengths. They just thought were annoyances that other people get frustrated with or that cause problems for other people. So that was really exciting, because this person really had not thought up until that point that they were ever going to be able to consider any type of permanent long-term work again. So that was really awesome. Other wins have also included a client getting one of the most glowing appraisals I have seen to date. And I've seen some pretty awesome appraisals, but this one was a huge kudos, because the sort of organization that they work for has been a real support. So that's been something really amazing to see. Obviously, as a practitioner, it's so exciting to know that there are organizations out there doing some really good stuff. So they've been incredibly supportive throughout this person's journey and gave an appraisal that actively included other people's feedback, unfiltered, with the specific sort of note to say, we've left it like this because we want you to see, you know, the raw positive feedback that you're getting from your team, from your management, from everyone here, so that we can work on that self-belief and you can really challenge, you know, that imposter syndrome. And that, for me, I was like, wow, that is incredible.
That really does align, doesn't it? Because you're not kind of taking somebody and then changing them, and you're giving people the ammunition to ask better questions of themselves. So you have all the answers you need. It's just about actually, have you reframed it? Have you changed perspective? And well done on those wins. And I'm sure there's so many more you can talk to us about. I have to get you back for a second one. Ben, again, same question to you. What kind of wins and successes have you had through the work that you do, the great work that you do, of course?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about challenges quite a lot, but what we find is that something is challenging because someone else has said it's challenging. And by challenging, what they mean is it's inconvenient, or it makes them feel uncomfortable, or they haven't learnt about it, or whatever it might be. And I think so quite often with the challenges, the piece of work needs to happen outside the person and say, actually, if you're gonna harness my brilliant memory, you just need to accept sometimes that I'm gonna say stuff that has nothing to do with the conversation that we're having. And that's not strange. That's just, it's not strange to me, you know, and so I think there's those pieces of work. And when that happens, brilliant thing, the most brilliant things happen. So mentoring one young lady to say that school found her a challenge would be an understatement. It just was I describe it as a mismatch of processes in terms of, you know, sit still for 60 minutes and I will teach you all the stuff that you've already read before because you got bored in a break time. You know, so literally they were ahead of the class and so on. But then I saw her in a vehicle, it's a work experience, in a vehicle parts of a large company, and she was bossing it. So essentially, she had like dealing with 12 different lines coming in. Nobody jumped the queue. She's there going, Kevin, you might worry me 3, 5 or 7 times a day, but I will tell you when that part comes in, because you know I don't lie. You know, she was just like fantastic, above fantastic in that role, and she felt it herself in terms of that, and just stuff like that. When we start seeing where the challenges lie, do they lie in the changes I need to make or the people around us need to make, then brilliant stuff happens.
Love that. Thank you, guys. You are both fantastic advocates. You also promote advocacy. So again, what would you say to everybody here are the things that we need to know on how to be the best advocate for neurodiversity and neurodiverse individuals?
Oh, shall I go first, Beth? So for me, it's leading by listening, and because you're not going to know unless the person is known, and the person is not going to be known unless you take time to listen, to understand all the stuff that seems sometimes at odds, or you know, or out of kilter, or whatever it might be. There's an understanding behind that. There's a reason behind that, and it's never malicious. It's just waiting there to be understood. And I think, again, with those scoping conversations that we have in terms of the way in which people might do stimming or self-soothing activities, and whether they want to be, whether they'd like you just to carry on and ignore it, or whether they'd like you to encourage them to notice it and stop it. but let's not presume that we know how they work. So yeah, all of that bundled up in a whole lot of listening, really.
Thank you very much, Ben. And Beth, same question to you, please.
Absolutely. I think just to really build on that, it's something that encapsulates all of the things that we have talked about so far in the webinar really well. There's a really nice kind of visual analogy. And I can't remember where I originally saw it, so I will do my best to find that. That will be a rabbit hole I'll go down later. Hang in, I can get it for the show notes. And it really helped to consolidate my understanding of what I need to do to show up as an advocate. And that is that when you are being an advocate, doing advocacy work, particularly if it's, let's say, a more sort of specific direction or outcome that you're hoping to expect, and it's not just sort of general advocacy, you are a microphone rather than the script itself. So, your job is to listen, as Ben has so wonderfully said there, and to make sure that that is amplified. So it's not necessarily a space for you to have, let's say, your own personal opinions and assumptions about it, but rather that you are there as that microphone piece to really make sure that that person has felt seen and heard and validated, and then that they have felt their needs communicated across the board. So, you are really there as that kind of amplifier, position to make sure that they're getting what they need.
Love that. Thank you. And again, just a quick question to both of you, actually, for the sake of time. In terms of creating an inclusive environment for, I think the majority of the audience today will be looking at it from a workplace or organizational perspective. What would you say are kind of the foundation stones of inclusivity in an organization that is fully inclusive for neurodiverse individuals?
That is a big one. Ben, welcome to take us away.
I think that there's Timothy R. Clark does sort of 4 stages of psychological safety, and the first stage is about inclusion. And if someone can answer the question, "Do I belong here?" and that's a positive, then inclusion is working. Someone said that equality is like having a chair at the table, but inclusion is being invited to dance. And I think that for me, it's got even bigger than that in terms of we need all kinds of minds to think in all kinds of ways if we are going to be brilliant in the future. We need it. We can't have an inclusion that says this is what inclusion looks and you need to go here. We need to be able to meet people where they are, and really get a sense of that. And I really, there are some brilliant non-verbal people out there. So how are they going to build this brilliant future with us unless we have a broader and wider understanding of inclusion? Like I say, all kinds of minds thinking in all kinds of ways if we're going to be brilliant in the future.
Thank you, Ben. Amazing stuff. Beth?
Exactly that. I couldn't agree more. And I would say sort of one of the ways in which we might be able to look at, really sort of thinking about this for ourselves and for the organizations that we work within is what barriers are there currently against inclusion and achieving inclusion, and how can we remove those? Yeah. So again, that looks different depending on the organization, depending on the industry, depending on the persons working within said organizations and industries, but thinking about those barriers and saying, okay, well, how can we overcome them? If we've got communication differences, how can we collaborate and work out different styles of communication that meet your needs? If we've got sensory differences, how can we work flexibly to create environments that don't, sort of maybe trigger some of those sensory overload difficulties that someone might have? So really thinking about, what barriers have I got and how can we dismantle them so that we can achieve that really psychologically safe and neuro-inclusive space.
Love that. Thank you, Beth. Any parting wisdom from either of you?
Ooh, that is a very open-ended question to ask a verbal processor at the end.
You can sing a little song, you can do a little dance, whatever you want. I guess, how do you want people to kind of leave this session, I guess, before we come back to the questions? How do you want people to leave this session? What would you say is the key message you want to get across from each of you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
For me, go on. Oh,
So please go ahead before I
okay.
start. Just
I
absolutely
think
rambling.
for me, what has happened is that I meet more and more brilliant people, and the key to that is me having changed in terms of to say I'm carry on learning, to say this is what training looks like, to say this is so actually what are those changes that we can make in ourselves to access more and more brilliant people who otherwise we wouldn't encounter, meet, listen to if we were going to stick with what we consider to be social norms.
Love that. Thank you. Beth?
Absolutely. I really love that too. So I would say that I hope people are walking away from this with some clarity and also some more curious questions that they can go away and really think about, reflect on, and, you know, sort of see how they might want to go about implementing different ideas in the future, and to always really validate that it does not matter what neurotype you have, what space you're in, you absolutely have the right to feel that you can belong somewhere. And that if you're not currently feeling that, then there are some absolutely incredible people, you know, such as Ben, who could really look at supporting you to make sure that you are getting your needs met, because that is, you know, absolutely within everybody's right to access.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for being here today. We're going to come back to the live room for any questions now. But if you're watching the recording or listening on the audio, or actually on the transcript as well, if you have any questions, we can be reached on team@forgingpeople.com. If you just mark that for the attention of whoever you wish to send that to, that will reach the right person. Although the contact details for Ben and for Beth will both be sent out by email tomorrow morning, along with the recording, the transcript, and also with the audio link if you prefer to listen. As you do, I'm very much a listener whilst I drive and travel kind of stuff. So all of that be with you. Please stay tuned for upcoming episodes of Balancing Acts. I can be reached personally, and nick@nickelston.com doesn't go to anybody else apart from me, completely confidential. The only social media place I hang out on is LinkedIn. That's a whole different mental health conversation we'll have a different time. I'm also on YouTube, where the video will be, and also a website and the podcast. The imaginatively titled The Nick Elston Show, ran out of ideas, is into season 8 very soon too. So stay tuned. I'm going to come back to the live room now, but thank you very much for joining the session today. Thank you very much. See you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.